Uh, Guys, are you able to hear us online? Hello? Guys, are you able to hear us?
Yes, we are able to hear.
Okay. Simran, just keep checking. Whoever is joining, please allow them in. Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. We are starting the session. Today's session will be in two parts. First, we will have Abhivardhan's talk, and then there will be a product showcase by another startup who will be presenting their Gen AI product, and it's for you to understand how the domain works, the space works, all of those things. Quick introduction about Abhivardhan. Abhivardhan is the chairperson and managing trustee of the Indian Society of Artificial Intelligence in Law and the managing partner of the Indo-Pacific Legal Research. He's a specialist in international technology law, artificial intelligence governance, Indo-Pacific studies, and the digital policy. Abhivardhan has authored several books, including Artificial Intelligence Ethics and International Law, originally published in 2019, and is a proponent of the Indic approach to AI ethics. He is also the author of India's largest, first privately proposed artificial intelligence regulation for India, called the Draft Artificial Intelligence Development and Regulation Act 2023. His work spans across various law, technology, and policy magazines and blogs, and he's a regular speaker on topics related to AI governance, disruptive technology ethics, and public international law. Please join me in welcoming Abhivardhan.
Well, I appreciate the elaborate introduction. By profession, I'm a tech lawyer, but AI is such a field which has been fascinating me since, let's say, 2018 or 19, before even the Gen AI thing came with its own vogue. And it all started with writing a book on AI and international law because an IT publisher called BPB reached out to me. They wanted me to write something on AI and law. They're technically a technology publisher. But my particular interest in AI has been there for some time now, and it's good to help people from a legal and business perspective because when we, as technology lawyers or data protection lawyers, as you know, the privacy lawyers, when we look at the way any technology is evolving, every company, every lab, every government entity which develops or uses technology have their own concerns. Okay, those people who are good at the skills and making it happen, that's a completely different issue. But those who are trying to level up with any of the ethical concerns which come up, I think it becomes important for us as tech lawyers to see how we can help it fit in. Which is why this session becomes interesting. And I understand that the projector might not be a bit helpful, but I'll try my best. So my introduction has been given, anyways. And well, what's today's topic to discuss? Let's understand that. So I think we are here to discuss about what we know as framework fatigue in AI governance. Now, let's understand what it means. So, in my field, in my line of work, what happens is that you must have been seeing all developments about DeepSeek, Kimi AI, right? All of these things just popping up once in a while. Now, in our field, what is happening? I'll tell you. January 3rd, 2025, India comes up with its draft digital data protection rules. 15th of January, we have some another AI governance guidelines from Principal Scientific Advisor to the PM. Then again on 31st, just last day, today the budget was released in the parliament. Yes, last day we have chapter 13 to the Survey of India, where the economic advisor, chief economic advisor, talks about what's going to be the impact of AI on employment and skills, future of work, all those things. Now, all of these documents pop up in India in like a month. How many did I say? I think three to four, right? Now you have three to four such documents which are popping up. I'll say that it's actually multifold even in the Western countries. So what's happened is that since the Gen AI, I would say trend technologically also became very relevant after GPT 3.5 became very much useful to people, or let's say not, let's say it became a thing for businesses. A lot of AI frameworks have just started to pop up. You know, a lot of documents come. Okay, this privacy approach, this fairness approach. You should not cause this bias. You should not cause this problem. And a lot of these approaches just keep piling up, right? Now imagine for someone who is building a tool hands-on and would have to go through each of them. Even let us say it is in the simplest language possible. Let us say you use a ChatGPT, you put your PDF file, whatever the document, you get some summary. Even then, it doesn't give a good picture because problem is that every document is drafted with the sense of what intent it has. So there's a difference between three things. And uh, so there's something called governance, there's something called regulation, which is more like control in its own way, and there's something called self-regulation. And there's also one more stage which is basically going to the courts. You know what, you want to file an issue, somebody has stole your code, or somebody has caused a problem that you know what they have not respected your own intellectual property. It could be anything. It could be documentation. It could be a particular aspect of the contract. It could be a very basic thing, right? Like like what happened in the US was that Microsoft was subject to the accusation that so everyone knows GitHub, right? So developers use GitHub, they put their code, and that's how accessibility starts. It becomes helpful for even applications like GitLab and many others. But what happened with GitHub was that Microsoft acquired GitHub, and a lot of code which was there on GitHub, considering that it is open access for everyone and all those things. Again, there are terms and conditions. You have your own GPL and BSD licenses. Microsoft looked at GitHub, the company itself, used Gen AI, and they actually scraped through all of your content, all of your code. Now, again, there are certain basic things which are fine. You do it. They are not some very proprietary code. They're basic code hacks. That's one thing. But then there are certain code codes which are very unique to you, right? You work hard for days or hours to build something new, novel out of it. So obviously, as somebody who's a coder or a developer, you wish to protect that. It could be in a backend with front end. It depends. So now, what happens is that a lot of times frameworks come in. Okay, whether it's a smaller MSME, a startup, or a company, or anyone, even a freelancer who's running a tool on their own expense, a lot of frameworks come to help them. Okay, NASCOM came up with their developers playbook, and they came up with a playbook saying, you know what, developers should do, X, should do Y, should do Z, and gave up. Now, all these documents pile up. If I can tell you, I mean, if the next slide could be, yeah, yeah, I think you can look at this, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, well, can't show you the contents, but in the presentation itself, the report itself, if you see, there's a particular page, I think after page number 17 or something, I've actually collated and shown that there are different AI frameworks which have come from November 2023 to Jan 2025. And they're like a lot of them. So, anyways, why have we come here? Why am I here in Hyderabad to speak about this? I think a lot of times what happens is that when you're building an AI system or when you're building any technology, for any business use or not for profit use, whatever it is. One problem what happens is that a lot of AI frameworks come in. Now they could be related to law, they could be related to industry, they could be even related to marketing practices, or they could be just basic about okay, fine, these are just some tips and tricks. If you're able to justify something as an internal policy, what are you doing, and how are you doing it? You don't need something like a very overarching framework to prove to some bureaucrat somewhere, but even if you need to justify why it is, I'll give you an example. So on March the 1st last year, 2024, and that was like at midnight, and that is media reported. I'm not lying about it. On March the 1st, 2024 at midnight, an advisory came. Basically, it's a non-binding document by a government saying, it happens like in the food and beverages industry. You can't promote certain items. Similarly, what happened with AI? They came up with a document. It said, okay, fine. This is a particular advisory. you have to register your AI systems in a particular format, in a particular way somewhere. And that somewhere is basically Lodi Road, which is the office of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Now, the problem with that was the whole advisory had defined AI in a very vague way also, because it classified Gen AI slash AI and all of this. And those who are in the tech side know very well that Gen AI is just one side of AI, not everything. If that were the case, then what is neural symbolic AI, right? On which Google DeepMind is working now. I've heard that even Tech Mahindra is doing it. Well. So, be it as it may, sometimes what happens in governance is a lot of things come out of anxiety. So there's a term in our glossary also, I mentioned in the report. We call it AI anxiety. That a lot of things are happening on AI. The media is hyping it up. It's just telling it's the end of the world tomorrow, and it is not. Turns out that, and that's also driving investments. Like when the new Trump administration came in, the new government in the US, they are like they want to build a lot of data centers. Well, if they can build it, we should also try a little bit in India. But then again, is it driven by the fact that there is some ROI in the AI data centers per se? Not just in terms of OpenAI and Alphabet, but also other SMEs and companies, right? There are a lot of like perplexity became perplexity because an Indian from IIT Madras thought, let's build something, right? And America gave him the chance, and he got some good investors, and he worked hard also. He is very good in product management, and that's how perplexity came in. But does it mean that it makes sense to have so many data centers, to have too much investment? Like you're claiming $500 billion, right? So what happens is that a lot of things in the AI field, including government governance, documentation, it's actually happening with a sense of anxiety. Then okay, fine. We want to develop something in AI. We want to do something in AI. Okay, fine. This is what we should do. This is what not we should do. A lot of blame passing happens, and that creates a lot of paradox actually. Why? Because when you try to do it, you're not able to implement it, and that leads to further problems. So I think let's just quickly discuss about the basics of AI ethics. I think that would make it more interesting. I have some model exercises which we can do for self introspective purposes. I mean, unfortunately, I can't. I think it's better this way, right? Yeah, yeah. I think that's fine. So, what is AI ethics and governance per se? So ethics is understandable, right? What is ought to be right, what is to be done in the most reasonable way possible, which is not harming anyone. I think that's a basic principle which anyone can agree upon. Again, that aspect of harm is also about the fact as to how much do you understand about the impact of your activities. The same happens with technologies like AI. But again, someone who is literally working in the tech sometimes also understand to an extent as to what could a standalone technology really do, right? Now that is something which a lot of times, unfortunately, people in the policy side, people in the corporate side don't understand. And that happens because, well, it's a hype around the technology. It's the way, like DeepSeek came in, right? And people said, okay, DeepSeek is great. It has defeated OpenAI, but we don't know about that. And I'm not getting on the whole OpenAI versus DeepSeek issue that they have stolen our data and all that media narrative. I'm not getting on that. But what DeepSeek has proven, and by the way, it's not actually the $5 million and the 2048 GPUs. It's actually rumors say that it is 10K GPUs or more, but that's a different discussion. What's important to understand for DeepSeek is DeepSeek did something with respect to open source modeling. Although technically it's not even open source because its code is not open source. Its model is open source, but the code is not open source. The training data is not open source. So how is DeepSeek open source per se? But of course, the model itself can be claimed as open source. So, but what we learn from this is that OpenAI, Anthropic, all these companies, they propose that you should come up with heavy AI governance solutions. They themselves did not know how much their AI systems were causing certain problems. Again, because the foundation model of OpenAI does a lot of things, right? It can make an itinerary for you. It can help you in drafting a contract, although the template may be copied from some high court website, which happens. Like I'm a lawyer myself, I'm trying myself. I asked this ChatGPT to once draft an income tax appellate tribunal application. Basically, if I want to appeal to income tax people in the court, and it just copy pasted a particular printed order from a particular IT branch. So again, how much efficient it is? Have you quantified this? I think those aspects are never addressed. So I think the same is with DeepSeek either. But what DeepSeek shows is more about self-sufficiency when it comes to investments. But it also shows that sometimes certain things in governance of AI also could be simple, so could be commonsensical, limited to what we do. Similar example is perplexity. Perplexity might have its own pro search model, but perplexity used to offer a lot of tiers of LLMs. Right? It used to offer you Mistral, it used to offer you GPT 3.5. Now it is GPT 4.0. If I'm right, it is GPT 3 or Mini also. So they have O3 Mini also now. Well, too many names. They also offer DeepSeek R1 now. They used to offer Claude 3.5 Sonnet also. So I use these things. So from a product management point of view, what happens is that Perplexity also knows that we are providing with limited aspects of improving productivity for an end user or a consumer. If that's the case, then what will be your AI governance approach? What will be your ethical approach? It will start with something very high level for auditing purposes to a bureaucrat or a government official. You should, if necessary, you should, if the government will require that for you, and that is something which is the least discussed across forums. I can tell you, for example, I was in a forum for G20 Brazil. So, G20 India, right? Everyone knows. So, Brazil became the G20 chair last year, and now, if I'm right, it is South Africa. Ironically, South Africa is also chairing BRICS, if I'm right. So, when Brazil became the chair, I was in a session for Startup 20 from an Indian point of view. And they were asking me, all these AI policies come up, this government comes up with this, what should we do? So I said that when it comes to basic ethical understanding, ask yourself, are you ready for capacity building? Are you ready to justify your policy? Because understanding ethics is not that hard. But it's more like when you do it, are you prepared for that itself? Are you like, I'll give an example for law school. The lawyers, I'll give an example. So interestingly, somebody was giving an exam. So it turns out that their assignment, which was there for the examination, it was found to be AI generated, like some percentage of it, 70% something. But when the student went to court, he said that and it is Jindal Global Law School, it is reported in the media. Can Jindal Global Law School justify their internal policy as to how did their AI become so accurate to tell me if that is AI generated or not? And turns out Jindal had no answer. So you're using these AI tools, fine. They're tool AI tools, they're sassy, they have their own benchmarks. Even the benchmarks are flawed. By the way, there's a whole section on it in the report as well. But if you can't even justify why are you using these technologies, that's like basic and governance of AI which you can do. Justify why are you using a technology for a particular purpose. I think that is something at a fundamental level because a lot of generative AI is used with, I'll limit to generative AI only. A lot of generative AI is actually useful in workflows because you need it for workflows. That's how agents are very different from workflows. Workflows are very different from automation. Workflows could also be categorized in in the category of wrappers also, but that's a different discussion altogether. So I think that's the way it should be seen. As to when governance has to be done, how do you justify use of AI? How you justify proliferating AI? How you justify commercializing it, or at least making it visible in the best way possible? It could be for anything. It could be for video generation. Like for example, there are Mid Journey and all these applications. Okay, now their models are great. If you are in the cinema or graphics industry, you want to do some storyboarding, create a concept, and then recreate the art. Then yeah, you can use it for brainstorming. There's no problem with that. But when you do brainstorming and you use the similar prompts to give similar kinds of responses, turns out it actually copies the same kind of content from the legacy productions like Marvel or DC or maybe the Paramount Pictures which have the Mission Impossible franchise. Now the issue with that is, let us even say for a moment that you don't use the Mission Impossible type AI generated content or the Marvel Iron Man type content. You don't use it for marketing somehow, you create your own, you do something. The problem is, are you using it for storyboarding or are you using it for what? Now for short-term marketing reasons, if you do it on Insta or somewhere, it might be good. But from a basic AI governance policy, you don't need something written on it. How will you justify the use of it? Because AI labeling happens. And if a lot of you people, sorry to not give attention here, if a lot of people use Reddit, they know that if you're creating a painting on your own, if you're a good artist, sometimes the Reddit has an AI system. It tracks a painting or a content to see if it is AI generated or not. But if you make it out of good faith, you did not use a single AI, you made it on Illustrator or you made it on Affinity or Canva, which I did for my report. Sometimes Reddit makes mistake in making sure what is an AI generated content, what is not. So you are stuck with a problem because your content might be labeled negatively and you are screwed, technically. And that actually is a problem, right? I told you about the Jindal situation, right? These are basic things, not some high level thing about Apocalypse or Terminator 5 or Terminator 6. Or I don't know, whatever. It's like basic things. Or it's not some major phenomenon either. So I think that's how we should understand governance. That's how we should look at AI ethics and governance. I think I'll take Q&A and we can discuss about if you have questions in privacy, aspects of fairness and AI bias. Bias also is interesting aspect. One is a socio bias where you cause the AI system is biased enough to discriminate on the basis of any identity. Well, a lot of American case studies are there, some European case studies are there as well, and yeah, there will be Indian case studies as well. I think there is one. But technically also it can happen. You can use these AI tools for insider trading, and SEBI doesn't allow it if you are in the stocks business. So ethics matters. It matters at a very basic level because you have to enforce a contract or justify your bylaws if you are in an application. That's why bylaws matter. So somewhere down the line, governance starts at that basic level, and of course, if you go at a different level, then every sector has its own requirements. So if the data protection law is implemented tomorrow, you will actually have to create a workflow, getting consent of your user each and every single time wherever necessary, so that the user is aware, according to the law, that yes, I am aware that this data is being processed at this moment. It could be a nightmare for the e-commerce app, it could be a nightmare for the payment app. Or maybe it could not be. Maybe they'll find a solution. I don't know. So that's AI ethics and governance 101. That was exactly what it was in the first chapter. But of course, there are still, what I'm saying is very basic. But then what happens is that even if we consider the fact that you justify your AI governance policy, there will be still a lot of documents which will pile up. There will be still a lot of things which will come to your suggestion. And that will create a situation which leads us to chapter 2 of what I wish to discuss. So, well, this was an analogy about transportation. I'll show it in one. But yeah. So this is about the overload of AI frameworks. So what happens is that you come up with a random AI framework. You see that yes, these are the frameworks. Okay, this is something in the BFSI sector, something in the pharma side, something in e-commerce, something in marketing, something in I don't know, teaching, because sometimes you use pedagogy tools, right? A lot of chatbots are being approved these days in the United States and now in India also for students in the primary level, right? So that they use these chatbots to learn. Now in the US, in the surveys we done, turns out that it's making children complacent. Like the children are assuming that the AI system knows a lot. So that's also a game with generative AI. Generative AI, when the responses come up, that's why I find prompt engineering a profession which is very not even a profession. Because when you and prompt engineering also invites you in AI governance session. I'll tell you why. So there was a health company. The health company thought, you know what? Let's have a diagnosis app. Okay, in some particular segment, it could be related to diabetes, it could be related to cardiovascular issues, something. And instead of even having proper doctors who are specialists for years, they just need a prompt engineer, typical prompt engineer, who can do very good prompting, could be very good when writing, knows a little bit about health tech in a very basic way. And that's how they're going to check the verifiability of their tools. That's not how you build Gen AI in health, right? And that's the thing which happened in the US. In fact, there was a banking chatbot in the US. Again, I think this was last year's news. Somebody was trying to get information through the chatbot in a legal way. I want to get through. HDFC has this chatbot. Everyone has this. I think SBI also has this. And that American bank's chatbot, it started very weird. It's a video code. So blame the media, not me. It started actually abusing their employer, which is even funny. Why do you start abusing your employer with chatbot? So turns out that the fine tuning was not done properly. Turns out that the tool wasn't built with some guardrails that it doesn't do the mistakes. And these look like very funny situations, but they happen. Similar is with GPT 4.0, the Sam Altman OpenAI. What happened with them? Well, the chain of thought processing which it does, the approach, DeepSeek R1 also follows. DeepSeek R1 does it a little bit more efficiently and specifically. O1, if you use it again, it still has certain categorical flaws and it still makes those juvenile mistakes on simple logic based problems. Like if there was some problem, I could have put it in the slide. Suppose you're throwing up two balls and you're going up to the stairs and checking which ball is falling down or at what level are these two balls are. Basic physics experiment or basic logical experiment. These are these questions in the MCQs you get in competitive exams. DeepSeek was kind of accurate in giving the answer, but OpenAI's one was like making random analysis, viscosity of air, gravitational quotient, and turns out it just said that it's above the second one. Turns out it's common sense. If you throw in a split second, it will fall. So even at a basic logic level, when you use the Gen AI tools, sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they actually don't make mistakes. And it's actually a race for companies to see which use case can be a part of the larger productivity chain, the workflow itself. How can it be better? Can you productize? Right. That's how you justify your total cost. That's how you justify your developing cost. And yes, at these basic levels, AI governance comes in. But of course, for a high-level document, you will not be able to implement it because if you try to do that, it becomes a nightmare of its own. So that's how it happens. There's a particular case study I created, a fictional case study about model deployment. Because when you deploy a model, you see a problem that there will be certain issues. You might try to fix it. You might try to not to justify it sometimes, or you might try to justify it to your end user who's affected, or maybe knowledge workers who are involved in that. And I think that itself becomes very necessary to see. Yeah. So that's definitely there. And that's how I discussed about overload. That when too many frameworks come up, sometimes you can't make decisions. I'll give you an example from a ground level perspective of AI governance professionals. There's one I've cited very well from LinkedIn. Her name is Sarah Clark. She runs infospectors in the UK. You can follow her. So Sarah is a good friend of mine, and we had a chat some time back. We were discussing about how AI governance happens in the UK, how it's a tough job for lawyers and tech people who want to understand law. And she tells that, okay, this random framework comes up. It's about a particular use case. Then it turns out the investor wants something else. They are focusing on the ROI side, but it's not getting compatible because the governance framework which is being imposed by a government or a trade lobby which says, what, no, these companies have to do it, that's how you get our endorsement or whatever. They are not even understanding how it actually works. And it creates a whole some confusion all around, which itself explains how framework overload affects real life. So, in that regard, there are six aspects of decision paralysis, like how you become kind of in a situation that you are not able to make a decision in 6 years. And they are the 6 ways I'll be quickly discussing now, since it is I think some time. So, yeah, yeah. There are six ways that decision paralysis happens. I'll give you the page number also for convenience. I think it's. Well, so the six ways to be stuck in decision paralysis, and this I'm telling you by virtue of my noticing the AI governance trends for the past 1.5 years. I mean, I've been in this field for some time now, but I'm telling you the 1.5-year trend because in the AI field, as the second presenter will be speaking, 1 year is like 6 years. So there are six decision paralysis trends which happen. The first one is that regulation may or may not have any trickle down. You come up with a high-fi regulation in Australia or Singapore or Japan. China is a different ballgame altogether. Or in the UK. Sometimes it might not have a trickle down. Sometimes it might not be implemented. Sometimes it might not be workable. And you can't do anything about it. Yet you have to abide by it. And then it might give a lot of money to the lawyers who are going to audit it for you. But then again, it doesn't help a company to sustain. So only big companies get the chance to survive. So that's not good for the ecosystem if we really believe that, you know what, across the world, not just India, we really want AI systems to succeed in the best way possible. That's the first decision paralysis with regulation. The second aspect is AI safety. So a lot of discussions happen that, you should have safety around AI. Okay, basic aspects like privacy or information security. But when it comes to AI safety itself, the only way it can work well is not just by coming up with regulation, but by coming up with an AI safety institute. Why? Because if you have research institutes which are working on things related to incident responses or adversarial machine learning and other related things, at least you know that this is the documentation of incident responses which have been happening. At least I can use it as a company or somebody who's a cybersecurity researcher who can actually help a particular company in solving their problem, right? Or maybe at least ensuring that some new solutions come up or a plugin or something else. But again, there's a dearth of it. A lot of AI safety discourse across the world, not just in India, is only about over regulation and killing the market. Unfortunately, that's the case. People don't think that people still don't realize that investing in AI is a hard job. It takes a lot of money. Even for third-party AI applications, it actually is a nightmare. Like it's about vendor rights. A lot of times you use your workflows on third party. You will have to justify your access rights sometimes. The cloud provider or to the foundation model through which you are doing it. So these things matter from a business point of view, right? From a legal point of view. They don't affect you right now, but they will affect you in 6 months. If because these companies in the US and otherwise, it depends if they're open enough to have that negotiation with you. So, if we really believe that the Indian AI ecosystem should grow, AI and analytics ecosystem, with genuine businesses which can make money as well as be ethical, then I think there should be an understanding as to if we should have AI safety research at all. That's the best conclusion because there have been so many discussions with government people on this study. And the problem which they have been facing is there is no AI safety documentation properly done in an Indian context. I'm not talking about cyber crime incidents, they're very different. Cyber crime incidents could be related to telemarketing or calling, and they are completely different. But AI safety is a very different niche. And again, in incident response, you can also find something. There are force organizations and others who might be working on it. But in AI safety, it's a completely different niche. I think what I've come to know is that there's a startup in Bangalore which has started working on AI safety research. But I think that's the first, at least, for the media narrative. There might be more. So that's what I mean. That's the second part. So, the third one. Yeah. So the third one is interesting. Responsible AI itself is overrated, and trustworthy AI is misrepresented by fiduciary interests. Now this is interesting. So what does it mean? So in 2023 end, there was something called the Bletchley Summit. Everyone agreed, came to UK, Rishi Sunak was the Prime Minister, they agreed for a particular declaration. Oh, this is a safety pact, we'll do this, we'll come up with this solution. Now, again, they lost on the efficiency front, they lost on basic third party safety front, and that created a lot of problems. Because when you went into that pathway, people used responsible AI to gauge a lot of costs. Now that's good for lawyers, okay, but that's not good for a company which wants to do something. Now that is something which needs to be understood, which needs to be decided. Because when you look at the problem, it still starts with that aspect. And I think for the Indian economy also what happens is that a lot of understanding of how AI affects our skills it's not properly documented. There was a particular suggestion by a particular chief minister who said that we should have a skill census or something in India. And I completely agree with him. There was a report on this in October 2023. I'm not going to ask you to read it, sir. 120 page document. It's boring. Don't read it. But I'll just tell you one thing from it because I had analyzed that report. That if you really think that AI is not going to take your jobs but going to affect your jobs or make you efficient or not, at least start documenting it. We are a big population. There will be someone from Northeast who do doing well, or somebody from I don't know Kashmir or Gujarat or something. And if you have an ecosystem of people who want to learn and adapt to AI, I think governments and to an extent private sector should also know what kind of practices are there which are helping them to scale up. And again, a lot of automation is possible in telemarketing and other things. But then again, it could also be helpful in scamming, by the way, in cybersecurity. It's actually not that hard for voice recognition. But then again, it has to be based on something which is on the ground and not off the ground. That's where all the responsible AI discourse fit. A lot of technology events happen, a lot of tech summits happen. I've been there. I'll be speaking in some event next week in Delhi. I'll not speak which one, but I'll be. And most of the time, discourse is, well, you should do this, you should come up with these guidelines, and they happen in the closed door. They don't happen where people want to commonsensically understand how exactly are their ethical concerns with respect to use of AI. So this was the third paralysis which was there. And I completely understand. There's a bit of a visibility issue with the slide, or it would not have been moving. But paralysis 4 will interest a lot of you. So there is a particular report which is from Rand Corporation. You can actually look at in the slide. I can't remember the page number again. My bad. Yeah, page number 32. Yeah. So if you look at 32, again the same problem that awareness itself becomes a form of distraction. You make people aware, but you make people aware for the sake of creating hype, upping up the costs. That was a very huge reason why Nvidia lost a lot of money in the market. And it was related. Because first, cost appreciation aspect, people were thinking, okay, now you don't need to invest that much money to Nvidia, which is again not true. Nvidia itself is a very valuable company, and the kind of semiconductor innovation they have done is just phenomenal. Very few companies can do that. I think nobody can. They're literally a monopoly, but for a reason. But then again, how can a retail investor be so, let us say, naive, which is short of Nvidia so easily? This shows you that a lot of awareness around AI has also been created. There are workflows, there are things which happen, but it's not something which is done in a documented or proper way, which causes a lot of noise and a lot of problems. And usually, it's a hyped up approach which reminds us of the Cold War situation. And it's not a Cold War situation right now. Like what happened with nuclear research in the 1970s and 80s. The US and the Soviet Union invested a lot in that. They did a lot of investment in the nuclear centers, and they did it. The funny part is that Chernobyl happened in the Soviet. In the US, they forgot to use nuclear energy that much. They still have it in use, but not that much. So, the purpose of nuclear energy itself was not achieved in a very productive manner. Same issue is happening with data centers. They're using them, but there are serious environmental costs. Again, those who even tell that there are environmental costs are also not aware, making people aware. They're just hyping it up. They're jacking it up. Like, unfortunately, and this is true, there was an Oxford academic who unfortunately said that DeepSeek made sustainable innovation because American companies did not follow AI ethics, like OpenAI, to build sustainable model. Ethics has nothing to do with what DeepSeek did. So, what DeepSeek had to do was that they created sustainable solution, better workflows, and that itself was a hard thing to do. So sometimes this needs to be understood that awareness itself should not be made overcomplicated. It should not be made uh, over overhyped in its own way, and that itself is the fourth one. I'll get on the next one, and this is something which is about benchmarking. So when you benchmark GenAI tools, This is a very hard thing to do. There are like 50 plus different benchmarking methods on fairness, aspects of transparency, multiple things. But sometimes the frameworks don't work around. And there's a paper for it which you should read, and it's a simple one. You can go right to the conclusion and cite it. That when you use these frameworks, there's a lot of transparency problem when it comes to how exactly the model developers have come up with these interactions and have made the conclusions about it. I think that itself creates a lot of problems because then you are not able to validate as to how exactly are you benchmarking something. See, and this happens a lot in benchmark reporting, which is another paralysis problem. Benchmarking itself is failing in Gen AI, and I'm talking about Gen AI only. I'm not talking about every single AI. Gen AI is one niche of AI. Currently, it's a hyped up part of the market. I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm saying it is what it is. But since Gen AI is in the book, I'm talking about the benchmarking in Gen AI. So of course, there's a paper on ArcSight. You can actually read it. It's a fun paper. It was submitted just on November 2024. It's a recent research. It's not something in the past. I think it's page number 38 or something. You can look at. And the last one, as I said, I talked about investor expectations and those things. Organization priorities are always multifaceted, they get complicated. And when they get complicated, a lot of problems. So, if you go to page number 37, of course, you can see this collage of all the AI documents. I'll not describe them to you. They are hyperlinked. When you click them in the PDF, you can actually read the documents yourself. But of course, if you don't wish to, that's your choice. I'm not asking you. But the idea was to tell you that this is still January 2025 and at least 8 of the frameworks have been reported in the context of India and across the world. There are some random Supreme Court in Singapore, then there's some court in US which is anxious about use of AI, so they have come up with the use guidelines. But again, some of them work, some of them don't work. Some of them only are for blame gaming, some of them are not for blame gaming. I think that itself explains how much overload has happened. So let's do something. Just to confirm, Ayush, everyone has access to this file, right? Okay, so let's do a simple game. I think this is getting boring. If you go to page number 38 or something, yeah, if you see from 38 to 42, can anyone tell me how many frameworks actually are from India? That's the least you have to do. If someone can come from the table, just have to look at the names, nothing else. Don't have to open the document. And this is like from November 2023 to Jan 2025. I'm not referring anything since 2020.
One,
One.
I can see that.
Real try. How many from India?
Yeah, two. I saw the
Three,
second one.
is it three or four?
Yes, three, four.
Yeah, I think it's four.
Four. Four. It's around 4 to 6 or something. Yeah, so it's around 4 to 6 or something. So the idea was to show that overload happens so much that even in India people got so anxious they came up with frameworks. And a lot of documents. If you look at the economics survey, if you look at the economics survey, which is chapter 13, you have the link directly. It starts with good theories, but then it gets on a point which is the funniest. The last part, which is conclusion, I mentioned it. It actually asks for imposing taxation if you're transiting to AI related jobs to corporate companies. Now, as the corporate companies also, the HCLs of the world, are they even managing the ROI with the GenAI itself? It will be a hard thing for them to say. So, right now, imposing taxation because it's a future of a problem that AI quote unquote might replace your job is not a practical option, right? Even for a country like India. You can try in the US, that's a different, it's an overgrown market. So, that's what I was trying to say all around. That a lot of frameworks come up out of anxiety. And when you go through them in a simple way, you'll realize that in theory they look very nice, they look very imaginative. It's like you are enjoying something which is good, but it's not like a milkshake or a boba tea, it's worse. So, well, that's the last part of this session, and I'll just quickly go over the model exercises. I think that would be a bit fun to do. And how much time do I
10 minutes.
have? Okay. So I think then we'll do the model exercises. I'll tell you the page number. Yeah. It starts from 48, page number 48. So this will be fun too. I'll make it. So if you go on page number 48, there's something called a model exercise. Basically, it's a part which I developed as an inspiration from of a training program which we provide. They're AI governance related training programs. And we have it in intellectual property and AI and corporate governance, AI and law one basics, and even tech law and 101. So this is like a simple problem. Suppose you are running a health department in a state, and you have mandated that okay, fine. These are the risk management frameworks for health related data, which is obviously very sensitive, patient data and all that stuff. And you have used the diagnostic tools. Okay, this is going to process the health record, the health history. Somehow you have also got access through Ayushman Bharat Yojana's database through API. Fine. And you're using the diagnostic tools in public hospitals. I'm not talking about private hospitals, which are, again, public hospitals are improving still, right? But turns out there were three problems. Rural clinics were lacking resources to conduct bias audits because they did not have money to do so, they did not have resources to do so. A lot of urban hospitals were using loopholes to classify tools as low risk, which but they were not, because if you are in the health industry, it's always high stakes. The data is high stakes. It could be monetized in so many crazy ways that you can't even imagine. Like in blockchain, people sometimes come up with suggestions like, "Oh, we can create an NFT out of your health record, and we can then give you 1 lakh rupees, and yeah, you'll be happy with it." Sir, no, thank you. That's not how you do business in blockchain. You can do better things than doing a Hawala scam. So these are the three questions which you can read on that particular page. I'm not asking you to come up with a solution right now to me. I'm not asking you to do that. But the idea is look at the questions and think that what could be the ground level practice? What could be the way that it is being classified as something very basic? So risk could also be asserted with aspect of what is an outcome, what's an impact, right? That is how you document a risk. If something has happened and it is risky, that at least gives you an understanding. I'll give you a fantastic example here from the automobile industry. So, you know that basic question. So, when a car is being sold to a customer, when it is at the physical testing stage, do the cars go through the stress test through the wall? They go through, right? Now, company thought, let's use a generative AI tool, predictive analytics. They have a CCTV camera like facility. Let's not do the physical stress test. Let's use the Gen AI tool to find how much it can withhold. But trust me, as a customer, will you trust the Gen AI tool or will you trust the physical test? Physical. So you can use the Gen AI tool. There's no problem with that. You can document it, show it in your marketing ads or audit reports, whatever. But then again, these questions come up, right? You are an automobile manufacturer, these questions come up. So the the exercise was the first one, of course, was about health, but that was the thing. The idea was that if you can self-reflect about the ripple effects, basic things which happen to you, can they become that high level? We don't know. But even at a low level, there is something called an impact which could be possible. That is one exercise. Yeah, this one is interesting. The next page, if you go, which is localizing AI safety, again in a healthcare startup example. These are fictional examples, but they are based on Indian scenarios. I have not mentioned the main company because I did not wish to out of conflict of interest. Again, same healthcare startup. They thought they're adapting with the framework, and they were thinking for a diagnostic tool for rural clinics. They thought, okay, fine, there are particular villages in a particular place in India. Let's provide them diagnostics. Let's use these AI tools. And I mean, okay, one question: have you heard of Bhashini, the India AI thing? The It's an alternative to Google Translate. Yeah. So imagine for a moment. I'm not saying it is the case. That they partnered with Bhashini and they use multilingual voice inputs. In this case, three languages because they have a better data set for that: Hindi, Tamil, and Bengali. And they must comply with the basic DPDP Act, which is basic data privacy legislation. So there are basic questions. When you use this for a particular town, what could be the language specific cases? What could be the way where you're using to get inputs from a particular patient in a particular language in a local clinic? How accurate could it be? How accurate could it not be? These are technical things, but sometimes when you document them, they come in your mind. That was the first question for this letter. Again, these are not questions of for whom you can have a perfect answer. But the idea is more around that these exercises give you a sense to think yourself first as a stakeholder as to what could be the things which might happen. There could be other aspects also, like how would you modify the technical documentation template if you don't have centralized audit bodies? What will you do? What could be the legal conflicts which might be happening if, let us say, the AI's language outputs in a particular language misinterpret local muhavras or idioms? Right? Happens sometimes. Um, uh, I remember, for the matter of fact, that there's a project called Bharat Gen, just launched in October. They were released in the India Mobile Congress. These guys were interesting. They used the language models translation to do a simple thing. You have purchased this Android phone. It's on the table. You scan it with your phone using Bharat Gen. And they are a project from IIT Bombay. They are actually able to help a person who's running a kirana shop to get all the necessary metadata so that they can put it on Amazon or all the e-commerce platforms. And they can do it in a particular language, in a translatable way, which is a great solution for the larger public. So I think Bharat Gen is, doing it now for Sanskrit and other languages. They're doing it in some other local languages like Hindi, Punjabi, this. But I'm just telling you that Bharat Gen might also have to address these things. So that's definitely there. That is segment two. How much time?
Almost
No,
four.
four. Then of course we have beyond the buzzwords. Again, same aspect, next page, which is around the same startup thing. Sorry for the fact that it's too much about health tech. I could have put fintech, I could have put pharma, I could have put marketing and graphics, but anyways. But yeah, graphics of course, same example. By the way, okay, one question. I think model exercise we have discussed enough. Suppose you remember the cover of the report, the very first one. There were three robots, right, dancing in their own posture. So tell me this basic question: these three robots which you can see, can I get the images of them copyrighted in India? I'm not talking about the law. I'm talking about common sense. Should we get it copyrighted? They are AI generated, by the way. Yeah, depends. So, ironically, India doesn't have any new legal position on this. But in the US, the report came in. I'll just tell you one line from it. They said you can copyright this all, you can copyright the text, you can copyright that logo which is made by hand, you can copyright everything in the background, you can copyright this. You can copyright the AI generated images. Yeah. So, because they say the logic is when you're processing from outside content, whether even if you have a partnership with Getty Images or Pexel, all these companies, if you have it If you're transferring the license to the customer to get it that way, then okay. But if you're not in general, which unfortunately some models get, Midjourney and others, then you can't get this copyright. But let us say I get an artist or somehow I develop my skills, I build it again, then it can be copyrighted. The one which I made, it could be in a sketch form, it could be in what you say neon style graphic, it could be in a massy form, massy movie form, you know, Indian massy movie. So, well, that was it. That was not model exercise I created out of hand. But that's the conclusion. I think should we deal with questions right now? What do you suggest? Uh, Let us know. Yeah, yeah. Perfect. Then I think I'm done. I'll deal with Q&A. We'll discuss it. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhivardhan. That was a wonderful session. I don't know how many of you understood, but we wanted to keep this session very beginner friendly because a lot of you, I think, are in the crowd are developers. You're just getting started on your journey in understanding AI ethics, responsible AI, what is accountability, what is governance, and it's very important for us to, as developers, to self-regulate and self-understand what all of these laws mean and what ethical development is, right? So thanks a lot again. It was wonderful. We'll get started with the next session. I'll hand over to Shahir, who will introduce himself and talk about his product as well.
Thank you, Aishi. Okay, this is too loud for me. Uh, Guys, can you hear me? Okay, fine. I think I'll come there. There are people on the meet, so you better. Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Okay, fine. Okay.